Zekthari ran through the smoke and fire that covered the mining colony on Kepler 442b. His forelegs carried him faster than most creatures could move, but today it felt like he was moving through thick mud. Behind him, the sounds of battle grew louder. The Vorthon Empire had come without warning, and they brought death with them. His squad of 12 Velthon warriors had been cut down to just 4 in the past hour. The enemy ships filled the sky like angry metal birds, dropping soldiers and war machines onto the planet's surface. Every building in the colony was either burning or destroyed, the screams of civilians mixed with the sounds of weapons fire. Zekthari's green scales were covered in dust and blood. Some of it was his own, but most came from his fallen brothers. His long tail helped him balance as he jumped over broken pieces of buildings. The retreat order had come too late. Much too late. The evacuation point was still 3 miles away through dangerous ground. Zekthari could see other Confederacy forces running in the same direction. Everyone was trying to reach the ships before the Vorthons could surround them completely. This was the worst defeat he had seen in his 12 campaigns of war. As he moved through a narrow valley between 2 hills, Zekthari heard voices speaking in a language he did not know well. Human voices. He slowed down and used his natural ability to blend with the rocks around him. His scales changed color to match the gray stone walls of the valley. 3 humans in military gear were setting up some kind of equipment near a pile of large rocks. They wore the blue and silver uniforms of the Terran Defense Corps. Zekthari had heard of humans but had never fought alongside them. Most species in the galaxy thought humans were weak because they came from a world with light gravity and soft conditions. The leader of the human group was a man with short brown hair and calm eyes. He moved with the confidence of someone who had seen many battles. The human woman next to him was studying a small device that showed moving pictures. The third human, a big man with thick arms, was checking weapons that looked too heavy for normal creatures to carry. Zekthari watched as more humans joined the group. Soon there were 8 of them. What surprised him most was that they were not running away from the battle. They were moving toward it. This made no sense to any warrior he knew. The calm-eyed leader looked up and spoke directly to where Zekthari was hiding. "We know you are there, friend. We could use your help if you are willing to give it." Zekthari slowly changed his scales back to their normal green color and stepped out from the rocks. The humans did not point their weapons at him. This was strange. Most species would be ready to fight when meeting unknown aliens during a battle. "I am Captain Jake Morrison," said the leader. "This is Lieutenant Amy Brooks and Sergeant Ryan Cole. We are here to slow down the Vorthon advance." Zekthari clicked his throat in the way his people showed confusion. "Slow down the advance? The enemy has 50 times more soldiers than you do. They have war machines that can destroy buildings with one shot. Why do you not retreat to safety?" The human woman called Amy looked up from her device. "Because there are still civilian ships trying to leave the planet. Someone needs to buy them time." "That someone does not have to be you," Zekthari said. "Your leaders did not order this mission." Captain Morrison smiled, and Zekthari found the expression hard to understand. Humans showed their teeth when they were happy, but they were about to fight a battle they could not win. Sometimes the right thing to do is not what your leaders tell you to do. Sergeant Cole lifted one of his heavy weapons and checked it carefully. "We have a good position picked out about 2 miles from here. Canyon walls on both sides, only one way for the enemy to come through. If we set up right, we can hold them for hours." "Hours?" Zekthari's tail twitched with shock. "You plan to fight for hours against an army?" "Long enough," Amy said without looking up from her device. "The last civilian ships need 6 hours to finish loading and get away safely." Zekthari had fought in many wars, but he had never met soldiers like these humans. In Valthon culture, a good warrior knew when to retreat. Saving your forces to fight another day was smart. Throwing your life away for strangers was considered foolish. But something about these humans made him curious. Captain Morrison's eyes showed no fear, even though he knew he was probably going to die. Amy worked on her battle plans with the same care she might use to plan a peaceful meeting. Ryan made jokes about the heavy weapons while preparing to face enemies that would surely kill him. "I know the Vorthon battle tactics," Zekthari found himself saying. I have fought them many times. Then you know we need all the help we can get, Jake said. But this is not your fight. You can reach the evacuation ship safely if you leave now. Sekathari looked back toward the evacuation point where his own people were gathering. Then he looked at the humans who were preparing to sacrifice themselves for people they had never met. He thought about the 12 campaigns he had fought and won by being smart and careful. He thought about how his commanders would be angry if he joined this hopeless mission. I will come with you, he said, surprising himself with the words. Amy smiled at him, and this time Zekthari understood the expression a little better. Thank you. We can use someone who knows how the enemy thinks. As they gathered their equipment and started moving toward the canyon, Zekthari wondered what he was doing. These humans were either very brave or very stupid. He could not decide which. But something about their calm confidence in the face of certain death made him want to understand them better. The sounds of battle grew louder behind them as more Vorthan forces landed on the planet. Soon, those forces would discover the canyon and the small group that planned to stand in their way. Zekthari had never been more certain that he was about to die. But for the first time in his life, he was also certain that his death might mean something more than just another casualty in a long war. The humans had taught him something new, about fighting, though he did not yet understand what it was. Ryan Cole clapped him on the shoulder with a hand strong enough to dent metal. Stay close to us, lizard friend. Today we are going to show these Vorthons what happens when they mess with people we protect. Zekthari followed the humans toward the canyon, wondering if he would live long enough to understand what made them so different from every other species in the galaxy. The canyon was perfect for defense, but terrible for the people who had to defend it. High stone walls rose on both sides, creating a narrow passage that enemy forces would have to squeeze through. Captain Morrison's team had chosen well, but Zekthari could see they would be trapped here just as much as they would trap their enemies. Amy spread out pictures and maps on a flat rock, while the other humans began setting up their equipment. Zekthari watched them work and felt more confused with each passing minute. These creatures moved like they had done this many times before, but they also talked and laughed like they were preparing for a party instead of a battle. Lisa, you take the north wall, Jake called to a young woman with red hair. Set up the long-range rifle there. You will have a clear shot at anything coming through the pass. The woman called Lisa nodded and started climbing the rocky wall with equipment that looked heavier than she was. Her movements were quick and sure, but Zekthari could smell the fear coming from her. Human fear had a sharp, clean scent that was different from any other species he knew. I am scared, Lisa said as she reached a good shooting position. I have never been in a real battle before. Zekthari expected the other humans to tell her to be quiet or to shame her for showing weakness. In Velthon culture, admitting fear was a sign that a warrior was not ready for battle. But the humans did something that surprised him. We are all scared, said a dark-skinned man named Carl, who was setting up explosive devices near the canyon entrance. Being scared means you understand what is happening. The trick is not to let the fear stop you from doing your job, Ryan added while checking his heavy weapons. Fear can make you faster and stronger if you use it right. Amy looked up from her maps and smiled at Lisa. Besides, you have the best shooting scores in the whole unit. If anyone can hit targets from up there, it is you. Zekthari had never heard warriors talk about fear this way. These humans seemed to think that being afraid was normal, and maybe even helpful. This idea was so strange that he could not understand it at all. As the morning passed, more humans arrived to join the defense. Soon there were 12 soldiers total, plus Zekthari. They came from different worlds and different backgrounds, but they all worked together like parts of the same machine. Jake gathered everyone together to explain the battle plan. The Vorthans will send small groups first to test our defenses. Then they will try a major attack with their regular soldiers. If we hold long enough, they will bring up their heavy weapons and war machines. How long do you think we can last? Asked a young man named Pete, who looked barely old enough to be a soldier. Amy checked her device again. If we are lucky and smart, maybe 4 hours against regular forces. When they bring the big machines, we probably have 1 hour at most. And the civilian ships need 6 hours, Lisa said from her position on the wall. That is right, Jake said. So we need to be very lucky and very smart. Zekthari listened to this conversation with growing amazement. These humans knew they could not win. They knew they would probably all die here. But instead of being angry or sad, they seemed almost happy about it. They made jokes and shared stories while they prepared to sacrifice their lives for people they had never met. Tell me about your families, Jake said as they finished setting up their defenses. This was another thing that confused Zekthari. Why would warriors talk about personal things before a battle? Lisa spoke first. My little brother just started school on Earth. He wants to be a pilot like me someday. I promise to teach him to fly when I get back. My wife is having our first baby next month, Carl said while adjusting an explosive device. I hope it is a girl. We picked out the name Emma. Ryan laughed and shook his head. My dog is probably wondering where I am right now. He is the smartest creature I know, but he still cannot figure out how to open his own food containers. Each human shared something about the people they cared about. Zekthari realized that these warriors were not just fighting for strangers. They were fighting for the idea that families should be able to stay together, and children should be able to go to school, and dogs should wait for their owners to come home. When they asked Zekthari about his family, he found it hard to answer. Felton warriors left their families when they joined the military. Personal connections were considered distractions from duty. I have no family in the way you mean, he said. The humans looked sad when he said this, which confused him even more. Why would they care about his personal life? Before anyone could say more, Amy's device started making warning sounds. Contact, she announced. Vorthan scout units are moving into the canyon. 12 soldiers with light weapons. The mood changed instantly. The humans stopped talking and moved to their fighting positions. But even now, Zekthari noticed they were not completely serious. Pete made a quiet joke about Vorthan aim being poor. Carl hummed a song while he prepared his explosives. These creatures found ways to be happy even when death was coming toward them. The first Vorthan soldiers appeared at the far end of the canyon. They moved carefully, checking for traps and hidden enemies. Zekthari had fought alongside Vorthans before and knew they were skilled warriors. Their gray armor was thick and their weapons were powerful. Wait for my signal, Jake whispered into his communication device. Let them get closer. The Vorthans advanced slowly, using their scanners to search for threats. Zekthari could see they had not detected the human positions yet. The canyon walls created shadows and blocked signals, giving the defenders an advantage. When the enemy soldiers reached the middle of the canyon, Jake gave the signal. Now. The battle began with Carl's explosives. The devices he had hidden in the canyon walls exploded at the same time, sending rocks crashing down on the Vorthan soldiers. 3 of them were crushed immediately. The others took cover and started shooting back. Lisa's rifle spoke from the north wall and a Vorthan soldier fell with a hole through his helmet. Her shots were perfect, just as Amy had predicted. Ryan's heavy weapons added their voice to the fight, sending explosive shells that shook the entire canyon. But what impressed Zekthari most was how the humans worked together. They communicated without words, each one knowing where the others would be and what they would do. When Pete ran out of ammunition, Carl threw him a new weapon without being asked. When Amy spotted enemy movement, Lisa was already aiming at the same spot. The Vorthan scouts were eliminated in less than 5 minutes, but Zekthari knew this was just the beginning. The real battle would start when the enemy brought their main forces. Good work, everyone, Jake said as they prepared for the next attack. Remember, we are not trying to kill every enemy soldier. We just need to slow them down and make them think twice about coming through this canyon. How many more attacks do you think they will try? Zekthari asked. Amy checked her device and frowned. Based on their usual tactics, probably 3 or 4 more before they bring the heavy weapons. Each attack will be bigger than the last. As if summoned by her words, new warning signals appeared on Amy's device. The second wave was coming, and this time there would be 50 Vorthan soldiers instead of 12. Zekthari took his position alongside the humans and checked his own weapons. For the first time in his life, he was not fighting for territory or resources or military orders. He was fighting for the idea that Carl's wife should be able to have her baby safely, and Lisa's brother should be able to learn to fly, and Pete should be able to grow old enough to understand what courage really meant. The humans had taught him something new about war, though he still did not have words for what it was. The second Vorthon attack came like a storm of metal and fire. 50 enemy soldiers moved through the canyon in perfect formation, their weapons creating a wall of deadly energy that lit up the stone walls. Zekthari had never seen humans fight a real battle before, and what he saw changed everything he thought he knew about warfare. Lisa's rifle sang from the north wall, each shot finding its target with deadly precision. But she was not just shooting to kill. She aimed for weapons and equipment, trying to disable enemy soldiers rather than destroy them completely. This seemed like a waste of ammunition until Zekthari realized what she was doing. Wounded enemies needed help from their friends, which slowed down the entire attack. Ryan's heavy weapons hammered the Vorthon advance, but he was also careful about where he placed his shots. He could have brought down the canyon walls and buried everyone, but that would have blocked the passage for future enemy forces. The humans wanted the Vorthons to keep trying to come through the canyon, because every attempt cost them time and soldiers. Carl's explosives went off in sequence, creating a moving wall of destruction that forced the enemy soldiers to spread out and take cover. But even as he fought, Carl was preparing new traps for the next attack. These humans thought several steps ahead in ways that impressed even an experienced warrior like Zekthari. Amy coordinated the defense from her position behind a large rock, her device showing her the location of every enemy soldier. She called out targets and warnings, but she also watched the bigger picture. "They are testing our left side," she announced. "Pete, shift your position 20 meters that way." Pete moved without question, and seconds later Vorthon fire struck exactly where he had been standing. Amy had saved his life by reading the enemy's intentions before they acted on them. The battle lasted 30 minutes, and when it ended, most of the Vorthon soldiers were dead or retreating. But the cost had been high for the humans too. Carl was wounded in the arm, and Lisa had used half of her ammunition. Worse, Amy's device showed that more enemy forces were already moving toward the canyon. "Third wave incoming," she reported. 100 soldiers this time, plus armored vehicles. Zekthari helped Carl bandage his wounded arm while the other humans prepared for the next attack. He expected to see fear or despair on their faces, but instead he saw something he had never witnessed before. These creatures seemed to get stronger as the situation became more hopeless. "Carl, can you still use your weapons?" Jake asked. "With one arm tied behind my back," Carl replied, making a joke even though Zekthari could smell the pain coming from his wound. "Lisa, how is your ammunition supply?" "Enough for the next 2 attacks if I am careful," she called down from the wall. "Ryan, heavy weapons are running hot, but they will keep working until they melt," Ryan answered while replacing parts on his equipment. Jake nodded and turned to Zekthari. "What do you think? Can we hold against armored vehicles?" Zekthari studied the canyon and thought about Vorthon tactics. "Their vehicles are too wide to move through the narrow parts. They will have to come in single file, which means we can concentrate our fire on one target at a time." "Good thinking," Amy said. "But those vehicles carry heavy shields. Our regular weapons might not be enough to stop them." Pete raised his hand like a student asking a question in school. "What about the mining charges? This used to be a mining colony, so there should be industrial explosives in the supply buildings." "Those buildings are half a mile away," Ryan pointed out. "Someone would have to run through enemy fire to get there and back." "I will go," Zekthari said immediately. The words surprised him as much as they surprised the humans. A few hours ago, he would never have volunteered for such a dangerous mission to help creatures he barely knew. "That is too risky," Jake said. "We need you here." "You need the explosives more," Zekthari replied. "I am faster than any of you, and my camouflage ability will help me avoid enemy patrols." Lisa called down from her position. "He is right about being fast. I have never seen anything move like he does." Amy checked her device and frowned. "The third wave will be here in 20 minutes. If you are going to try this, you need to leave now." Zekthari looked at each of the humans and realized that something had changed inside him. These creatures had become more than allies or fellow soldiers. They had become something he had never expected to find in the middle of a war. They had become friends. "I will be back," he promised, and started running toward the supply buildings. The journey was every bit as dangerous as they had expected. Fourth and patrols were everywhere, searching for hidden defenders and preparing for their next attack. Zekthari used every skill he had learned in 12 campaigns, plus some new tricks the humans had taught him about thinking creatively under pressure. He reached the supply buildings and found exactly what Pete had predicted: industrial mining charges designed to blast through solid rock. Each one was powerful enough to destroy a small building, and there were dozens of them stored in reinforced containers. Loading the explosives was the easy part. Getting back to the canyon with Vorthon soldiers everywhere was much harder. Zekthari had to move slowly and carefully, using his camouflage to hide from enemy patrols, while carrying enough explosive power to level a city block. Halfway back to the canyon, he heard sounds that made his blood run cold. The third Vorthon attack had begun early. Heavy weapons fire echoed off the canyon walls, and he could hear the grinding noise of armored vehicles moving over broken rock. Zekthari abandoned caution and ran as fast as his 4 legs could carry him. The mining charges bounced and rattled in their containers, any one of which could explode if damaged too much. But all he could think about was getting back to help his friends before it was too late. He reached the canyon just as the first Vorthon armored vehicle pushed through the narrow entrance. The machine was twice as tall as a human and covered in thick metal plates that deflected the defenders' weapons. Its main gun swiveled toward Lisa's position on the north wall. Without thinking, Zekthari leaped onto the vehicle's back and began attaching mining charges to its armor. The metal was hot enough to burn his hands, but he ignored the pain. Lisa was in danger, and that was all that mattered. The charges exploded just as Zekthari jumped clear. The armored vehicle disappeared in a ball of fire and smoke, taking a section of the canyon wall with it. The explosion was so powerful that it knocked down several Vorthon soldiers and cracked the windshields of the vehicles behind them. "Nice work," Ryan shouted over the noise of battle. "But we have 2 more vehicles coming through." Amy's device was showing red warning signals everywhere. "They have brought twice as many soldiers as I predicted, and there are more vehicles moving up behind these." Jake looked at the remaining mining charges, and then at the narrow part of the canyon where the vehicles had to pass through one at a time. "If we set off all the charges at once in the right place, we could bring down enough rock to block the passage completely." "That would trap us in here too," Carl pointed out. "I know," Jake said quietly. Zekthari understood what the human captain was thinking. They could stop the Vorthon advance by destroying the canyon, but they would not be able to escape afterward. It would be a final sacrifice that would buy the civilian ships the time they needed. But before anyone could argue about the plan, Amy's device made a new sound that froze everyone's blood. "Titan-class mechs incoming," she announced in a voice that sounded like she could not believe her own words. Zekthari had heard of Titan mechs but had never seen one. They were walking weapons platforms as tall as buildings with armor too thick for any normal weapon to penetrate. No ground force had ever destroyed a Titan mech in direct combat. "How many?" Jake asked. Amy stared at her device. 3 of them. They will be here in 10 minutes. The humans looked at each other, and Zekthari saw something pass between them without words. They all understood that this was the end. Titan mechs could not be stopped by anything they had, not even the mining charges. But instead of giving up, they began preparing for one final battle against impossible odds. And for the first time, Zekthari truly understood what made humans different from every other species in the galaxy. They were not stronger, or smarter, or better equipped. They simply refused to stop fighting as long as there was something worth protecting. The ground shook as the first Titan mech stepped into view at the far end of the canyon. Zekthari had seen many war machines in his 12 campaigns, but nothing had prepared him for this. The metal giant stood 40 feet tall, its legs thick as tree trunks and its weapons pods bristling with enough firepower to level a small city. The humans watched the approaching doom with expressions that Zekthari was beginning to understand. There was fear in their eyes, but also something else, something that looked almost like excitement. These creatures seemed to find joy in facing impossible challenges, as if the worse the odds became, the more alive they felt. "Well," Ryan said, while checking his heavy weapons one last time, "this should be interesting." Amy's device showed all 3 Titan mechs moving through the outer canyon approaches. Each one was heavily armored and equipped with shield generators that could deflect anything short of ship-based weapons. Her calculations showed that their combined firepower could destroy the entire canyon in minutes. "We need a new plan," she announced. "Everything we have prepared will be useless against those machines." Jake studied the approaching Titans through his scope and nodded slowly. "The mining charges might work if we can get them close enough." To the mech's legs. "Those machines are strong, but they still need to balance. Someone would have to get right next to them," Carl pointed out, favoring his wounded arm. "That would be suicide." "Not necessarily," Pete said, surprising everyone with his quiet voice. "The Titans have blind spots near their feet. If someone was fast enough and small enough, they might be able to plant charges and get away," Lisa called down from the north wall. "The first one is already in the canyon. We need to decide now." Zekthari watched the Titan mech lumber forward, its massive feet crushing rocks to powder with each step. The machine moved slowly but with unstoppable purpose, like a natural disaster given metal form. Its sensors swept back and forth, searching for targets to destroy. "I will do it," Zekthari said, and once again his own words surprised him. "I am the fastest here, and my camouflage ability might confuse their sensors." "Absolutely not," Jake replied immediately. "This is not your fight. You have already done more than enough." "This became my fight the moment I decided to stay," Zekthari said. "These people you are protecting, they are my people now too." Amy looked up from her device with tears in her eyes. "Even if you succeed with the first Titan, there are still 2 more coming. We cannot ask you to face all 3. "You are not asking," Zekthari said. "I am choosing." Ryan started loading mining charges into a pack that Zekthari could carry on his back. "These are set for timer detonation. 30 seconds after you activate them, they will explode. Make sure you are far away when that happens." Carl showed him how to activate the charges despite his wounded arm. "Press this button and run. Do not try to be heroic about it. Just plant them and get out." Pete handed him a communication device. "Stay in contact so we can coordinate. If this works, we will need to be ready for the other 2 Titans immediately." Lisa's voice came from the north wall, tense with concentration. "First Titan is halfway through the canyon. Its weapons are charging up." Zekthari strapped on the pack full of explosives and checked his equipment one final time. The mining charges were heavy enough to slow him down, but not enough to stop him from moving fast when necessary. He looked at each of the humans and realized that he was no longer the same creature who had joined them that morning. "If something goes wrong," he started to say. "Nothing will go wrong," Jake interrupted. "You will plant those charges, get clear, and come back so we can plan for the next Titan. And if something does go wrong," Amy added, "remember that Carl's wife needs to have her baby safely and Lisa's brother needs to learn to fly." Zekthari nodded and activated his camouflage. His scales shifted to match the gray stone of the canyon, walls making him nearly invisible even to his human friends. He slipped out of their defensive position and began moving toward the approaching Titan mech. The closer he got to the machine, the more terrifying it became. The Titan's legs were thick as buildings, and its weapons pods tracked back and forth with mechanical precision. Energy fields crackled around its hull, and the ground trembled with each step it took. But Pete had been right about the blind spots. The Titan's sensors were designed to detect threats at long range, not small creatures moving near its feet. Zekthari was able to get within touching distance of the machine's left leg, without triggering any alarms. The metal was hot enough to burn, but he ignored the pain and began attaching mining charges to critical points where the leg connected to the main body. Each charge had enough power to blast through solid rock, and he was placing them at structural weak points that should bring the entire machine down. Through his communication device, he could hear the humans coordinating their attack on the remaining Vorthon soldiers. They were still fighting the smaller enemies even while the Titans approached, refusing to give up any ground they did not have to surrender. "Charges placed on the first leg," Zekthari whispered into his communicator. "Moving to the second leg," Be careful, Lisa's voice replied. The second Titan just entered the canyon. They are staying close together. Zekthari moved around to the machine's right leg and began placing more charges. The work was dangerous and difficult, requiring him to climb up the Titan's armored surface while staying invisible to its sensors. One wrong move would alert the machine to his presence, and he would be destroyed instantly. As he worked, he could hear Amy's voice updating the tactical situation. Third Titan is in the outer canyon. All 3 machines will be in firing position. In 5 minutes. Timer set for 30 seconds, Zekthari announced as he activated the charges. I am moving clear now. He ran as fast as his 4 legs could carry him, using every bit of speed and agility he possessed. Behind him, the Titan mech continued its advance, unaware that it was carrying its own destruction. The 30-second timer seemed to take forever to count down. When the charges exploded, the sound was louder than thunder. The Titan's left leg disintegrated in a cloud of smoke and metal fragments. The massive machine tilted sideways, its balance destroyed, and crashed into the canyon wall with enough force to shake the entire mountain. Direct hit, Ryan shouted over the communication system. First Titan is down, but there was no time to celebrate. The second Titan mech had seen its companion fall and was scanning the area with all its sensors. Worse, the third Titan was moving faster now, apparently understanding that something dangerous was hunting them. Second Titan is activating countermeasures, Amy reported. It is deploying scanner drones to detect hidden threats. Zekthari looked at the remaining mining charges in his pack and realized that his camouflage trick would not work a second time. The Titans were now alert and prepared. Getting close enough to plant more charges would be almost impossible. Through his communicator, he heard Jake's voice giving orders to the human team. They were repositioning to support his next attack, even though they knew the odds were hopeless. These creatures would keep fighting until the last breath left their bodies, and they expected him to do the same. I am going for the second Titan, Zekthari announced, and began running toward the next machine. But as he moved across the broken ground of the canyon floor, he realized something that changed everything. The humans had not just taught him about courage and sacrifice. They had taught him about hope. Even when facing certain death, they continued to believe that their actions mattered. For the first time in his life, Zekthari understood what it meant to fight for something more important than his own survival. And that understanding gave him strength he had never known he possessed. The second Titan's scanner drones found Zekthari before he could reach the machine's legs. Small flying devices surrounded him, their sensors penetrating his camouflage and marking his position for the main weapons. He had seconds before the Titan would turn him into ash with its massive guns. But the humans had taught him that sometimes the impossible could be made possible through teamwork. Lisa's rifle spoke from the north wall, her shots destroying 3 scanner drones in rapid succession. Ryan's heavy weapons hammered the Titan's sensor arrays, forcing the machine to rely on backup systems. Amy coordinated their attack with perfect timing, creating just enough confusion for Zekthari to reach his target. He slammed the mining charges against the Titan's leg joints and activated the timer, but this time he knew he could not get clear in 30 seconds. The machine was already turning its weapons toward him, and there was nowhere to hide in the open canyon floor. Get down, Jake's voice shouted through the communicator. Zekthari dropped flat against the ground just as Carl's remaining explosives detonated along the canyon walls. The blasts brought down tons of rock that crashed between him and the Titan's weapons, creating a temporary shield. The mining charges on the Titan's legs exploded a moment later, and the second machine toppled backward in a cloud of smoke and debris. 2 down, 1 to go, Pete announced, but his voice sounded strained. The constant fighting had exhausted all of them, and their ammunition was running dangerously low. The third Titan mech had learned from watching its companions fall. Instead of advancing into the narrow canyon, it stopped at the entrance and began systematically destroying the walls with long-range weapons. Huge chunks of stone rained down around the human positions, forcing them to take cover. It is not coming close enough for the mining charges to work, Amy reported, her device cracked and sparking from nearby explosions. The machine is trying to bring down the entire canyon on top of us. Zekthari looked at his remaining explosives and realized that conventional tactics would not work against this final enemy. The Titan was too smart and too careful to fall for the same tricks that had destroyed its companions. But the humans had taught him something important about thinking creatively under pressure. "I have an idea," he announced through the communicator, "but it will require perfect timing from everyone." Jake's voice came back immediately. "Tell us what you need." "The Titan is staying back because it thinks we are hiding in the canyon," Zekthari explained. "But what if we were not hiding? What if we were running away?" Amy understood first. "You want us to make the Titan think we are retreating. It will advance to finish us off, and then you can attack it up close." "Exactly. But you will have to make the retreat look real. The machine's sensors will detect any deception," Lisa called down from the north wall. "That means actually running away and hoping you can stop the Titan before it catches us." "I know," Zekthari said. "I am asking you to trust me with your lives." There was a moment of silence on the communication channel. Then Ryan's voice came through, steady and sure. "We trusted you this far, lizard friend. No reason to stop now." The plan required split-second coordination. The humans would retreat from their positions in apparent panic, drawing the Titan forward into the canyon. When the machine advanced to pursue them, Zekthari would attack it from behind using the last of the mining charges. Jake gave the signal, and the humans began their fake retreat. They abandoned their weapons and ran toward the back of the canyon, looking like defeated soldiers fleeing in terror. Their performance was so convincing that even Zekthari almost believed they were really giving up. The Titan mech detected the retreat immediately and began advancing into the canyon to finish off the humans. Its massive weapons charged up as it prepared to destroy the fleeing defenders. The machine moved faster now, eager to complete its mission. Zekthari waited until the Titan was fully committed to its advance, then began his final attack. He ran along the canyon walls, using every skill he had learned from both Valthon training and human creativity. The mining charges felt heavier with each step, but he forced himself to move faster than he had ever moved before. The Titan's rear armor was thicker than the leg joints of the previous machines, but Zekthari had saved the most powerful charges for this moment. He placed them at critical points where the machine's power systems connected to its weapons arrays. If the explosives worked as planned, they would disable the Titan without destroying it completely. "Charges placed," he announced through the communicator. "Timer set for 20 seconds, everyone take cover." The humans dropped behind rocks and debris just as the mining charges exploded. The Titan mech shuddered and sparked, its weapons powering down as electrical systems failed throughout its hull. The machine tried to turn around to face its attacker, but its movement systems were damaged, and it could only move slowly. Zekthari found himself face to face with the crippled war machine, close enough to see the pilots inside its armored cockpit. They were Vorthon soldiers like many he had fought before, but for the first time he felt something other than hatred for his enemies. They were just people doing their jobs, like the humans who had taught him about sacrifice and courage. The array. Titan's emergency systems activated, and a voice spoke from external speakers. "Unidentified alien, you are ordered to surrender immediately or face destruction." Zekthari looked at the damaged machine and realized that he had a choice to make. He could destroy the Titan completely and kill its crew, or he could disable it and let the pilots live. The humans had taught him that sometimes mercy was stronger than revenge. "Your weapons are disabled and your movement is limited," he replied to the Titan's crew. "Withdraw from this system and tell your commanders that these people are under protection." There was a long pause before the Vorthon voice replied. "Acknowledged. We are withdrawing." The Titan mech turned around slowly and began limping back toward the canyon entrance. Its retreat was picked up by Vorton forces throughout the system, and within hours the entire enemy fleet had withdrawn from the planet. 3 days later, Zekthari found himself at the evacuation point where the last civilian ships were preparing to depart. Jake, Amy, Ryan, Lisa, Carl, and Pete had all survived the battle, though they carried wounds that would take time to heal. More importantly, they had saved over 300 civilian lives from multiple species. "So, what happens now?" Lisa asked as they watched the rescue ships loading refugees. Now we go home and try to explain what happened here, Jake replied, though I am not sure anyone will believe us. Amy smiled and pointed at Zekthari. We have a witness, a very reliable witness. Carl held up a picture of his newborn daughter Emma, who had been born safely while they were fighting in the canyon. I know what I'm going to tell her when she is old enough to understand. I'm going to tell her about the day we fought beside the bravest creature in the galaxy. Zekthari felt something he had never experienced before. It was not the satisfaction of winning a battle or completing a mission. It was the warm feeling of belonging to something larger than himself. These humans had become his family, in a way that had nothing to do with blood or species. Months later, Zekthari stood before the Galactic Council to give his official report on the Battle of Kepler 442b. His testimony led to a formal alliance between the Confederacy and Terra, but more importantly, it changed how other species viewed humans throughout the galaxy. Before I fought beside humans, he told the assembled delegates, I thought courage meant not being afraid. I thought strength meant having better weapons and more soldiers. I thought victory meant destroying your enemies completely. He paused and looked around the great chamber at representatives from dozens of worlds. The humans taught me that real courage means acting despite fear, not because you lack it. Real strength comes from protecting others, not from harming enemies. And real victory means that children can grow up safely and families can stay together, and ordinary people can live ordinary lives without terror. An old delegate from the Rigel system raised a tentacle. Are you saying that humans are superior warriors because they are more violent? No, Zekthari replied. I am saying they are superior warriors because they understand what is worth fighting for. They do not fight to conquer or destroy. They fight to protect and preserve. That makes them the most dangerous enemies and the most valuable allies in the galaxy. After his testimony, Zekthari visited Earth for the first time. Walking through human cities, watching families go about their daily lives, he finally understood what Jake and his team had been protecting in that canyon. It was not territory or resources or strategic positions. It was the right of ordinary people to live, love, and dream without fear. He ended his visit by attending Carl's daughter's first birthday party. Emma was learning to walk, taking unsteady steps between her parents while they laughed and encouraged her. Watching this simple scene, Zekthari realized that he had learned the most important lesson of his life. Before meeting humans, he had thought fear was weakness to be overcome. Now he understood that fear was the most powerful force in the universe when it was focused through love. The humans had not taught him to be fearless. They had taught him what was worth being afraid for.